Everybody at Universal thought that Back to the Future was the greatest title, except for one person. That was Sid Sheinberg, the head of the corporate company. He did not like Back to the Future at all.
He said, nobody's going to understand the title. What does it mean? Back to the Future? Back to the Future? What does that mean?
One day we get a memo from Sid Sheinberg where he suggests the perfect title for the movie, Spaceman from Pluto. And Space Zombies from Pluto is a comic book that the kids have in the barn. And that's what he thought, this would be a really hip title.
And I think Zemeckis said, well, Steve, you have to stop him. We can't call that movie, we can't call this movie that name. And I didn't quite know how to handle it because I didn't want to insult Sid, and we all love Sid so much, and he had gambled so much of the studio's money on this crazy idea for a film. And it was the only note he had given. I mean, if he'd given other little notes, we could have addressed those notes, but he gave a big note, changed the title. So all I could do was send Sid back a note, just saying what a great sense of humor he had, and we all get a great laugh out of it, and thank you so much, for just starting our morning off with a huge laugh. And Sid never brought it up again.
Bob and I are big believers in setting things up and paying them off later. Back to the Future is a textbook example of that. So one of our intentions with this sequence was, let's tell everybody all about Doc Brown before we ever see him.
That shot took us all day long. We did 3 or 4 takes, if I remember. But if you take the elements and break them down bit by bit, you'll be amazed. It opens up on a wall of clocks ticking, and they all have to be on the same time. Now, you might be able to do that with 1 or 2 clocks, but if you have to set all the clocks and start them all at the right time so that they're not getting advanced of one another, you have 20 guys behind the set with wires, and you haven't even gotten to the next item of the storytelling. You had to have the coffee drip on cue. We had a guy underneath putting a little tray of smoke on the second pass when the toast comes up. The dog food machine, we built a dog food machine that could open a can of dog food. But we practiced with one brand, and then when they got the licensing around, it was another brand, and that brand didn't plop out. So we had to be underneath the dog food machine with a torch heating up the dog food so that it would come out and land in the bowl. A lot of storytelling that went into that shot. It's brilliant. It's a brilliantly composed shot. A lot of work to get there. And then the giant speaker was a bit of a challenge in its own self. Inside there we had to lace pyrotechnic material to make it break. We had air movers to blow papers through that. We had a stuntman that was wired with a guitar right in front of a speaker that's going to blow up pyrotechnically in front of him with all the little puffs of smoke elements that should go with that kind of thing and where the pieces are going to go. He has to spring back on cue, hit the bookcase. Of course, that was another element. And then that breakaway has to come down. Then we have to take him out, put Michael in, dress him up, and then he sticks his head up. And, a lot of work.
Rock and roll.
The whole movie was a challenge. So when you're looking at the production design, you go, hold on, wait a minute. We're doing a present-day movie, but then we got to do this period movie. We've got to find those cars. We've got to find those outfits. So there were all kinds of things going on just on the production side that were, also happening in the movie. So it was a fun challenge.
I was only like 3 or 4 years old in 1955, so I don't really remember what it was really then, but it was a time where there was an explosion of media. There was television, there were movies. It was the first time in the history of mankind that adolescents, which they called them teenagers for the first time, became an economic and powerful force.
Give me a milk. Chocolate.
So it was a great time to do a story about adolescence, because it was sort of the birth of adolescence.
How's your head?
Good. Fine.
One of the approaches we carefully considered was, how do we take the audience to that time period with a sense of nostalgia and do it visually also?
Isn't he a dreamboat?
And part of the solution was to always shoot with a little bit warmer color palette. The light that we used, we put a little bit of a warm gel on a lot of the lights. and we lit with a little bit softer light whenever it was appropriate, so that subconsciously the audience could sense that it was a different time, but maybe a little warmer and fuzzier time. So that was a lot of the fun. And then the contemporary time period, I shot with just a little bit harder light, with truer colors, you might say, just to give it a slightly different feeling.
We at the Hill Valley Preservation Society think it should be preserved exactly the way it is, as part of our history and heritage.
Here you go, lady. There's a quarter.
Thank you.
Fort Hill Valley. At first we thought, well, maybe we're going to go find a place, you know, and we went and scouted some locations up in Northern California, you know, some of those old gold mining towns, you know, that's had a 50s feel to them. But it made us realize we can never do everything we needed to do in those towns. We could never control anything. And so then once we realized we needed to have as much control as we did, then that sort of became, okay, let's just do it on the back lot.
It's got a time so that just as he's in the center here, that she's there and on the horn.
Yeah. But that'll work good to spin off and come.
It's not that easy to shoot on a back lot, you know, especially for a modern movie, because they look like back lots. But when you think about bringing, you know, truckloads of period cars, traveling and having costumes brought to a distant location and all the things that it would need, it turned out to be impractical from a money standpoint. But we realized as we were designing, actually using the back lot turned out to be a real plus, because we could really make it look awful in the 1980s and make it look pristine and almost phony looking in the 1950s, which of course is what towns and movies from the 1950s look like, because they were all shot on the back lot.
We could pretty much do what we wanted, and the back lot really became the core of the film visually. And I think it worked out really well. We had, there was a lot of product placement, and I was very careful to make sure that the things that were suggested were applicable for 1955. A great example is the Texaco station. And Texaco sent me the complete set of drawings of what the Texaco station should look like. And the period pumps, they sent the whole 9 yards to us. The clock tower. The building basically existed. What didn't exist was the entire top, which we created with the pediment and the clock, and those two cats perched on the pediment. Believe it or not, I found those cats in the stock units department. They were from a movie that was made a couple of years earlier called The Cat People. Also, in front of the building, it was all pavement. There was no grass, and we put in this large bed of grass with a monument to soldiers from World War II. So we did more than just embellish it. We reinvented the back lot for that film. And to my knowledge, it's never been that elaborately reinvented again.
Bob had the luxury of being able to be on the lot and being able to go back and do things as he saw fit. And he came up with things like the sparking of the skateboard. He said, we got to have, after I'd shown him a cut of it, he said, we got to have sparks right here. So they went back another day and they do those pickup shots of just those kinds of close inserts and stuff. So he had the luxury to keep working on a sequence until he got it exactly how he wanted and how it would really pay off for him. And I worked on that sequence off and on for many weeks. He would bring in pieces and we would just keep adding to whatever he felt needed to be fixed up.
The skateboard sequence was really quite clever, and it was really nice how Bob was able to compose everything inside that square and make it look like the long chase that it really is, doing a bunch of short little pieces. And then we had to drag the car into the manure truck and then dump the manure on them and cover them up enough and safely so that they could breathe. But the manure wasn't real manure. It was made up of pellets of dirt and vermiculite and fuller's earth and just regular gardening, potting soil. We compressed some together to make them look more like manure.
I'm gonna get that son of a bitch.
Where does it come from? Yeah, where does he live? I don't know, but I'm gonna find out.
I think all the actors deserve credit here, but you can imagine Leah Thompson when she knows she's going to play his mom and then play somebody when she's his age. That's an interesting dynamic as an actress to think about.
I loved the challenge. I was totally up to it because I think maybe because I was a dancer, I understood the physicality of changing those people.
I think a man should be strong so he can stand up for himself and protect the woman he loves.
And the whole fact that a mother falls in love with her son and can destroy the future that way, I found really appealing because it was so kind of demented. But I found that it was a difficult road that I had to walk, and I had to sew that into my character because I had to be really physically attracted to my son and make that funny and not frightening. But I think it helped by having the innocence of the 50s going on, and it was fun because it gave Michael a lot to play against.
Ah! Where are my pants?
Over there, on my hope chest.
She didn't know that this was her son, so she's totally innocent. And what makes her innocence even more rich is her little naughtiness, her little kind of wanting to give in to her instincts and her desires. And she was just so cute that as much as I wanted to play Marty's kind of revulsion and Marty's fear and angst and nervousness about the situation, I never wanted to let go of the fact that she was cute and he was flattered and kind of excited by the attention. Have you ever been in a situation where you knew you had to act a certain way, but when you got there, you didn't know if you could go through with it? It didn't get to being sick to me. It just got to be like, what a dilemma. What an amazing situation he's in.
What made it all finally work, because we were dealing with this, this Oedipal thing, was when we came up with the idea that the mother rejected the son after the kiss. Then I knew what I had to do. Then it made it all okay, because some cosmic thing happens through time. And then we wrote that magnificent line, which is my favorite line in the movie, which is,
When I kiss you, it's like I'm kissing my brother.
And once we came up with that solution, it never really, I knew it was all going to be fine. Although the audience, I guess, but I don't know, because see, I don't have any objectivity. But I guess the audience, it becomes quite suspenseful because they don't know where the movie's going to go tonally with this thing. So it's kind of interesting.
I guess that doesn't make any sense, does it?
Believe me, it makes perfect sense.
I just recently found my original Back to the Future script, and I was like, whoa, look at all the notes. I worked so hard on also the depth, not just the comedy, but there's a lot of heart. There's a couple moments with Crispin and I that are very touching. When I look up at him at the soda shop, when he says, Lorraine, you're my density, and when he punches Biff and I look up to him, they're like great film moments that are full of emotion. And we really broke it down. We really made contact with each other, and I'm very proud of that.
The high school, which was Whittier High School, we shot all the exteriors there and like the stuff in the interiors in the corridors and all that, but the dance we shot up here in Hollywood because the gymnasium at the Period High School had been updated, and so we couldn't, so then we had to go find it, and we found that there's a church on the corner of Highland and Franklin, and so they had an old gymnasium.
It was a lot of fun, the music stuff, because I played guitar as a teenager. I played in bands from when I was about 14 years old. So, I was a journeyman guitarist. I was never, gifted, but I could certainly, I knew my way around Johnny B. Good and my way around the basic scales.
That thing right here where you're bouncing the bar on the second string, go to the second, yeah, and you bounce there, bounce there, bounce there.
I had a teacher named Paul Hansen, a guitar teacher, who was an amazing guy, and a really talented musician and a great teacher, really patient. And we broke down what had been pre-recorded because it was important to me to be able to finger sync it. I could play it basically as it was recorded. It probably wouldn't have been as smooth had I done it, but I was basically in the ballpark. So if you played guitar and you watched it, I was hitting all those notes. Although I adjusted it from B flat to B so I could play on the fret markers. So I had that, and then I worked with the choreographer because Bob wanted it to be really active, the scene, and he wanted a lot of movement. So we thought it would be cool as the music intensifies to kind of do a running tour of all the styles of all the guitarists that would influence someone of Marty's generation. So there's a little bit of Pete Townsend there with the windmilling. A little bit of Jimi Hendrix. And I think a few other things, Chuck Berry, Duck Walk, and it was really fun to just kind of map that out and put it out on the stage.
The movie originally had a climax at a nuclear test site. The plutonium-powered time machine was literally going to need a nuclear reaction to send it through time, and we devised this very intricate sequence where they had to take the time machine out on a nuclear test site and harness a actual nuclear explosion for it to go back in time. That turned out to be very expensive, and we ended up not doing it.
But having the budgetary restraints of having to shoot the climax of the movie on the back lot actually made the story much better. So there's kind of a method to the madness in the way things work in Hollywood. You're forced to come up with creative solutions to solve, mechanical and physical problems. And our physical problem was they just said, we're not going to give you the money to go and shoot in the desert. But it turned out to be a much more romantic thing to have it be lightning.
As long as you hit that wire with a connecting hook at precisely 88 miles an hour, the instant the lightning strikes the tower, everything will be fine.
Just standing on that ledge with a cable attached, 4 flights up, if I lost my grip and fell, I'd be caught, but it would be ugly. So I'm up there and I'm saying the lines and doing that, the bell's going. You don't have to act. It's real. It's about as real as it gets,
Then we duplicated that entire set piece on stage 12 at Universal so that we could do all the high work low on the ground, where Chris is playing with the cable and the cable falls and catches on his pant leg and all those inserts. All was done on stage 12. All the wind machines had to be there, all the rain elements had to be there, all the clock mechanism had to be there, everything the same, what we did out in Courthouse Square.
It worked out so much better in the whole story of the clock tower because it became part of the character of Hill Valley. This unique event happened in this small little bizarre town rather than a national worldwide event that you could find in any newspaper and everyone in the world knew when atomic tests were going to happen. And it happened at night, and it made the movie much more dramatic looking. So it all turned out to be better for the movie.
We needed 2 editors because of the tight schedule. If I'd been there by myself, I would have been overwhelmed. And I took the first big action sequence, the parking lot sequence with the terrorists at the beginning of the movie. And then it was decided that Harry would take the big action sequence at the end of the movie. We had no idea that it was going to be as big and as complex as it became, but we were trying to divide things up equally.
That took a while. I seems like I've spent 4 or 5 weeks, or maybe 6 weeks, not all the time, but going back and forth to that. Every time he would shoot Marty by the sign, he would shoot Marty driving the car, I would shoot the inserts of the car and the clock, and then the dock sequence, and the tree and the cable. So there were maybe 12 different, almost 12 separate segments that had to be edited and brought together. And then not only brought together, but intercut, creating a forward movement and a speeding up so that as you were moving towards the actual moment of lightning strike, the things were moving in a way that they were converging and cuts were getting closer and tighter. And while we were editing, they were editing those sound effects in a very creative manner. They used jet engine whine to create some of the DeLorean sounds. It was really an interesting job to put this together in a non-digital age with 100 tracks or more of some things that were being put together to create the world of sound.
Oh, Marty! Marty, here's your keys. You're all waxed up, ready for tonight.
Keys.
That ending was a comment on the 80s because, you know, it was the me generation. I mean, it's really an ending that I don't think you'd want to do today. I mean, the idea that having a BMW is a good thing, or being successful as a novelist and having a home that's appointed with expensive furniture is very much an 80s idea. It's an 80s idea, and as a matter of fact, there were a lot of European critics who commented on that, that's an interesting comment on American society. Although in America at the time, it brought the house down. But it does set the movie in its own historical time.
Everything is great. I thought I was terrible in the movie, and I may be right, but I was so tired, so exhausted, and it was such a surreal experience. And it really, towards the end, I had no concept of really what I was doing or how it all fit into a greater piece. I had tremendous faith in Bob and Bob G and Steven, and my concerns were not for the movie. I thought the movie would be great. I thought I would be terrible.
Bob and I were happy if the movie was going to break even. But I remember this vividly. We were down shooting at Whittier High School for the night scene outside of the dance. And we had kids packed in to catch a glimpse of Michael J. Fox. Girls were lined up 7 deep to see him. And Bob and I had no idea how big a star Michael was from the TV show. We had no idea. So we started thinking, well, we might have something here. We might have something here.
But I don't think we realized the real power of that until we got the film all together.
When it started to come together and we could see how the humor was working and how clever it was, that's when we thought, oh, this is starting to really work.
I finally invent something that works!
It's your ass, it works.
The movie worked on paper. You know, the movie worked when I saw the first cut with temp music. But when I really knew that we had something that was going to stand the test of time was when we took it, previewed it in front of an audience.
But it was just a scramble to get finished, because they finished shooting and 3 weeks later we were in a theater in San Jose previewing the movie.
We were showing the movie to a completely cold audience in San Jose. They had absolutely no idea what they were going to see, except that Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd were. They didn't even know it was about time travel. So they're watching the movie, and the DeLorean is revealed. We don't know what it is. We see Doc put the dog in the car, and it takes off and it disappears. And there was this very uncomfortable silence, because there were some people that thought, did they just kill that dog? Look out! And then when the dog comes back, there was a visible sigh of relief, and then when it's explained that it's a time machine, the audience started to get it.
And at the end, when the car goes up and flies off and the screen explodes into Huey Lewis, the people came up out of their seats practically hitting the ceiling. I'd never seen a reaction. They had had such a good time. It was fantastic.
We had at least 6 or 7 spontaneous applause and people jumping to their feet. And it was in an era before the internet and before people were tweeting and emailing and the vast amount of effort being given to marketing. It was a surprise to people. They were, we were with audiences who were experiencing something for the first time.
And it was the highest score on a test screening that Universal had ever had up to that time.
And the movie was originally scheduled to come out August 16, 1985. Sid Sheinberg saw the movie at Universal at our second sneak preview. Sheinberg saw this reaction and he said, we need to get this in the theaters for the 4th of July weekend and have it play for the rest of the summer. Because he recognized that you don't have a sneak preview like that very often. So we hired on more sound crews, more sound guys, and we were working post-production 24 hours a day. And 9.5 weeks after we wrapped shooting, Back to the Future was in the theater.
Well, you're always looking for an image that can be easily and quickly identified with the movie, and this image of Michael looking at his watch and standing by the DeLorean, all of the elements of the movie were in that first one sheet.
We had a long history with Drew Struzan, and he just does beautiful work. I mean, there's very little illustrative art that's used today to sell movies, but at that time, it was still something that people really appreciated.
We spent a year trying to figure out a one sheet, and I think that thing showed up like 2 weeks before the release of the movie or something. And I think the thing about poster art with an artist like Drew who does that, which he was able to do when it really works great, is it captures the tone.
So glad to meet you. I've been waiting all my life to make a movie good enough to have you do the poster. That's what he said to me the second I met him. So it was the start of a beautiful friendship, obviously. It was great fun. We'd roll around on the floor and I'd show him drawings and we'd talk about them, and got to be good friends with Bob Gale as well as Bob Zemeckis. And in all these years, I have never had an actor pose for me. The movie's usually finished by the time they call in someone to do it. Well, Michael and Chris both posed for me personally on episode 2 and 3. So that was really fun.
Back to the Future gets released 4th of July weekend 1985. It does $11 million at the box office on about 1,000 screens, which was really a big hit. That was a big hit. The second weekend, it does better than the first weekend. That's when we said, oh my God.
I remember being bowled away. You know, it just kind of got swept away into this giant success.
I went over to London to do this Family Ties Goes to London, and Back to the Future opened, and I was doing satellite interviews with people in the States. And I could tell from their response it was really going to be something extraordinary. And then I get a phone call from my agents saying, this is the biggest movie in America. It will soon be the biggest movie in the world. And I didn't even know what that meant. I thought, oh, that's nice. They said, no, you don't understand. This is huge. This is massive. I was like, oh, yeah, cool, great, good. You know, I'll do better next time. He said, no, it's great. It's great. And so then I kind of understood what was happening, but I didn't really fully get it until I got back.
And that summer of 1985, for the next 12 weeks, 11 of those 12 weeks, Back to the Future was the #1 movie in America.
And then, you know, it took off worldwide, and we were going to London to the royal premiere. It was going to Japan. It was working everywhere. And, you know, it was just fantastic. So we started thinking about, well, what about a sequel?
People say to us, well, you guys must have known you were going to do a sequel when you put that ending in there. Of course, we had no idea we were going to do a sequel.
You've got to come back with me.
Where?
Back to the future.